Hi, I'm Jonna Till Johnson, CEO of Nemertes, and I'm here with my co-host, John Burke.
CTO of Nemertes.
And you are listening to Heavy Strategy, the show that tries to ask the right questions, not give the right answers. And we are lucky enough today to be here with Manan Shah, who is the SVP of Product at Alkira, and we'll be asking him what I hope are the right questions. Welcome, Manan.
Thanks for having me, Jonna.
So Manan has 20 years of experience in product management, leadership, and people management, always the hardest part, across a variety of networking and cloud computing companies, including companies with technologies like SD-WAN, SaaS, IaaS, and so forth. He was previously director of product management at Viptela and at Cisco, and held product management roles at Citrix and Brocade. So with that, he's going to be telling us a bit about Alkira and how Alkira fits into next generation architecture. So with that, Manan, can you tell us a little bit about Alkira and what the company does?
Sure, Jonna. And John, thanks for having me on this podcast. And Alkira provides end-to-end network infrastructure as a service. So think about what the cloud providers have done for applications. So they provide the infrastructure, and they provide. Nobody needs to worry about the underlying hypervisor, the host, and the likes around that. And you just worry about the application. Similarly, Alkira provides network infrastructure as a service on which customers can design, deploy, and manage their network and build out that network. It's a completely SaaS service for networking.
So, what are some of the ways in which people use Alkira?
Yeah, there are many different ways. Essentially, Alkira is a networking platform, end-to-end networking platform with many different use cases, John. And different customers use Alkira for a variety of different use cases. Some of the customers may be using it for multi-cloud networking. Some of the customers may be using it for firewalls consolidation and segmentation and micro segmentation, essentially the security use cases. Some of our customers also use it for what we call extranet as a service to connect to their business partners. And S&P Global, for example, is a public reference customer of ours. They acquired a company called IHS Markit, who has about 500 to 700 business partners. And all of these business partners are connecting to Alkira over this extranet as a service use case. Another large enterprise, Koch Industries, they are the second largest privately held company, and our customer inside of Koch is KGS, which is the central IT team, and they offer services to all of their lines of businesses like Invista, Georgia Pacific, Molex, so on and so forth. And they use Alkira for a firewall consolidation, multi-cloud networking, bringing on-prem networks into the cloud, so on and so forth. So many different customers use our solution for different needs altogether.
So let's start with that multi-cloud networking, because I'm sure people are listening to this and going, hang on, I already connect to multiple clouds. So how is it I have a network, I connect to the multiple clouds through the network. So what exactly is Alkira giving me that's different from what I have today?
Think about how customers started on the cloud journey. A lot of customers started, yes, they must be in multi-cloud, but they may have gotten a direct connect for AWS or Express Route for Azure or a Google Interconnect for Google and just connected the pipe to the cloud. To us, that is not networking. That is just creating one road to the cloud and calling it done. Networking to us is understanding how the network traffic patterns are, how to connect to multiple different clouds. And what we provide is an end-to-end network service where you can bring in traffic from on-prem, and there's multiple different ways you can bring it. Some of our customers bring traffic through from the data center using a direct connect or express route. Some of our customers bring in traffic through SD-WAN. We integrate with a variety of different SD-WAN vendors from their branches and campuses. For partner connectivity, customers to standard space IPsec from their existing router or a firewall. And we also have remote users directly landing into the Alkira solution. So many different ways to connect just the on-prem. On top of that, Alkira discovers all of the workloads that are running in all of these different clouds and allows customers to very easily stitch those workloads into the Alkira fabric without necessarily needing the underlying connectivity and understanding, because each cloud provider has different capabilities, different nuances, and different limitations. Just staying up to date with all these cloud providers is a challenge in itself. And that's, we just talked about connectivity. On top of that, with Alkira, you can insert firewall services, DDI services like info blocks. You can also do load balancing and a variety of different services, so that it's an end-to-end network and security platform on which you have full visibility, control, and governance of the network.
So it's quite a palette of services, and you've talked about a bunch of different use cases. Are there use cases that your customers basically led you to, where they figured out some novel way to apply the services and surprised you?
Yes, John, absolutely. And that's why we kind of position ourselves as a platform, as a networking platform, because anytime you have a platform, you can do a lot of different things with the platform. And some of our customers have been very savvy, are very knowledgeable, and they understand the capabilities of the platform. And not only they leverage us in a unique manner, but they have also made us do enhancements which of course align to our vision, but essentially accelerated our vision in many ways. Techion, for example, is a mid-sized customer of ours who actually does not use us for the corporate connectivity, but they use it for their business line of business. So Techion is in a business of auto dealership management services. So all of the auto dealerships that they onboard, they would onboard through our network. And essentially provide access to the workloads in the cloud. So some customers have used it for the IT side of the house. Some of customers use it for the line of business. So absolutely, you think of a platform, and there's so many use cases that you can leverage Alkira for, and different customers have absolutely done many different things with the platform.
Well, and I love that concept of a platform, because that's really a fundamental architectural component which oftentimes is missing. I think from the standpoint of an end-to-end network as a service platform, I think that the challenge that some folks may have is looking at this and saying, well, yeah, but I have the network, so what is the platform giving? And I think one of the cool things that you mentioned earlier was that discovery of workloads and the analysis of the traffic that's happening across disparate heterogeneous networking types. Somebody can be coming in across the internet. Somebody can be coming in on MPLS, Direct Connect, and you're looking at all of this, regardless of what the physical connectivity is and whether you bought it from AT&T or Verizon or British Telecom, and kind of saying, okay, what traffic is going where and what does it need? Maybe you can talk a little bit about how you help automate provisioning for that, because once you get to what does it need, the next step is how can I give that traffic what it needs? And of course, if you're just handling that at the very basic physical level, it means you're jumping into a bunch of firewalls and configuring a bunch of routers, or dealing with some SD-WAN gear. Talk to us a little bit about how you can enable that provisioning and management of that traffic.
Yeah, and in this day and age, automation is key, right? Anything that you want to do at a scale, automation is key. What is also important is to give customers the capability and the flexibility to control the traffic and give them the visibility. So, in addition to the connectivity and the services that we talked about, the Alkira fabric also offers a very robust set of policies. Things like route policies, traffic policies, NAT policies. We auto detect overlapping prefixes and so on and so forth. So customers have a lot of control in terms of how they want the traffic to flow on the fabric. Now, on top of that is what we call the automation services. So everything that you can do in a Alkira user interface, you can do it using the APIs, you can do it using the SDKs, and more importantly, you can do it using Terraform. So Alkira is a Terraform provider as well. And most large enterprises actually leverage multiple of these interfaces concurrently to access the service. We have one customer that has done something very interesting. Not one, actually a few customers who have done something very interesting. where they, as a networking team, they have set up all of the networking constructs, the segmentation, the VRF, the micro segmentation. The security team deploys the security constructs, and then they tell their app dev community that as soon as you deploy your app using Terraform in any cloud provider, you leverage Alkira's Terraform module to do the network stitching. And that way, the network and the security team
Mm.
are not even in the critical path, but they are enforcing all of the policies and the compliance needs that the organization has by allowing their app dev community to be self-service.
That's
And
go ahead, John.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I just wanted to jump in and say, we've spoken with some of your customers, of course, and one other aspect of that cloud style service delivery for networking end to end is that it exposes and makes consistent a view of the cost of all that connectivity. And, for the first time in a lot of organizations, most of the ones we spoke to, makes it possible to see how much it's actually going to cost to run a specific workload in a specific environment. So you can compare and decide where a workload should be placed, based on cost, at least, and performance. Is that something that you're embracing, in that sort of spirit of FinOps that's still rising in the land?
Yeah, and FinOps is a very, very wide term, so I want to be careful in terms of talking about FinOps, but absolutely the cost aspect and the modeling of the cost aspect is super important in educating the customer that, hey, where you run and what it costs and how much it costs and how you do it is super important. One of the unique capabilities that we have that helps a lot of organizations is the ability to charge back. So on different aspects of our solution, we have something called a billing tag. So you can tag that connector or the service with multiple different tags, and we actually create the invoice based on those tags so that the line of business can be charged by the central IT team based on how much they are using and what type of consumption they're doing. So that is the transparency is very key in this day and age, because we have all been to a situation where no matter who the cloud provider is, once in a while we'll see a bill that is multifold more than what we expected it to be.
Oh, yeah.
Every one of us have been there, and transparency is important. Understanding the cost is very important, and that's what we provide to our customers.
And John, I know you're going to want to jump in and ask about the next big announcement, but Manan, I just sort of have to circle back to what you've been saying, because it sounds like what you're telling folks is essentially that you're able to massively reduce the complexity of management, massively reduce the overhead required to manage, configure consistently, whether it's security policies, networking policies, and automate that so you're taking the teams out of the critical path. And then there's this whole other angle of the transparency that allows you then to, for the first time, make informed decisions based on the information that you're getting back about things like cost, which gets back to, John, your favorite topic, the workload placement policy. You can't really begin placing workloads intelligently unless you know what it actually costs to put them where you're putting them. So that's actually a really cool way to think about all of this, I think.
Yeah, when we have done some analysis on and discussions with customers, what we have seen is every single customer has reduced the amount of time they have taken to onboard service. Every single customer around there. About 44% decrease in the number of devices. About, I want to say about 80+% decrease in the staff time required to bring a new cloud. And these are some stats that we have from our research and from our discussions with customers that have significantly helped customers both in terms of the time to value or time to productivity, if I may say, as well as reduction of complexity and simplification of the network. And when I say simplification of the network, I don't mean that at the cost of comprehensiveness. We want to have the comprehensive networking capabilities, but in a simpler consumption manner and reduction of devices, reduction of complexity.
So, what is the next big thing? You've just had a big announcement. What was your big announcement?
Yeah, so we, as I was mentioning, we have a platform on which we continue to enable more use cases. The big announcement that we made in October is essentially to launch ZTNA as a new use case on our platform. And the goodness of that is you can continue using our cloud exchange points, which are kind of virtual colo. You can think of it that we are distributed fabric environments. And on top of that, where you were doing on-prem to cloud or cloud, or on-prem to on-prem, now you can do user to app, user to internet, as well as app to app control. So you have a single way of managing all of the traffic patterns, including users, with full ZTNA capabilities, and monitor them and troubleshoot them, everything using one way of doing it, one way of managing the network, but with a distributed data plane.
So basically, I don't say mean just, you're giving them the ability to implement those security policies inherently in the platform, as opposed to needing to buy third-party products. But doesn't that put you directly in competition with the folks who do sell those third-party products, like the Palo Altos and the Zscalers and the Fortinets of the universe? I mean, now, your customers can get the same thing from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say there is some overlap, but for the vast portion of that, actually, Palo Alto and Zscaler are actually our partners. And in fact, and if I look at our customer base, Palo Alto is the number one service that is deployed on our fabric, because customers can see a lot of benefit of the connectivity models, the service models, the cross-platform options that customers have. So it's actually not really a competition like the way you would think. It's more of a competition. And yes, there is some overlap for sure, but even for the customers who come in on ZTNA, on the Alkira fabric, for going to the internet or for user to app, they can insert a Palo Alto firewall in the mix. And as a result, they can get the full security stack from Palo Alto, if that's what their vendor of choice is, or Fortinet, or Checkpoint, or Cisco, whoever your vendor of choice is. But that's the flexibility that we provide, is no matter where you're coming from, whether it's coming from your branch, campus, data center, or a Starbucks or another coffee shop, you can get the same kind of capability, same kind of compliance, and same resource access, assuming your identity is verified, your posture is correct, and you're coming from the right location.
So basically what you're saying, if I've heard this correctly, is you provide core ZTNA capabilities built in, baked in, if they wish to purchase them from you because they don't already have one of the others. If they already have a vendor of choice with its, that is a security focused vendor, they can go ahead and use that and integrate that directly in. So what you're really announcing is kind of the ability to bridge that gap for folks who haven't already made the commitment to a particular vendor. They can be using you for either until they make that decision, or maybe parts of their network that vendor just doesn't cover for some reason. Maybe it's
absolutely, that's correct. In addition to that, we also have customers who want a single fabric for all of their networking needs. And inside of that fabric, they want a security stack from a Palo Alto or a Fortinet. So even that is possible. So they can connect from their branches and campus using one of the SD-WAN vendors. They can actually have a different vendor for firewall. They can leverage our ZTNA capabilities and still have a different vendor for firewall for inspection. So they have a freedom of choice in terms of what they want to do and how they want to do. We provide the network infrastructure as a service to our customers.
Got it. And now that includes, essentially what you're saying is that Zero Trust is now a component of that network infrastructure.
Exactly. It's a component of the network infrastructure. It's a core use case of the platform that customers can leverage for.
And so I want to just jump in too, because I know a lot of folks who are out there listening, when they hear ZTNA, they only think about the user to app piece of ZTNA, and they don't think about the app to app or environment to environment levels of it. But because of where you're placed and because you're a platform, you actually have the option of exerting policy there as well, right?
That's true. App to app is a critical component of it. With the last 4 years of what we have seen with COVID and other things, and by the way, we are recording in 2024. So based on what we have seen, we have a lot of customers who use VDI environments. And when you have VDI environments, you effectively, even though the traffic comes from a VPC or a VNet or a Google VPC, it's actually a user traffic that's coming in. So it's user to app, user to internet, also app to app is equally important.
That's a huge thing because a lot of organizations, they've just been putting off the app to app piece. And if they take nothing else away from this conversation, please be thinking about that. So one thing that we always think about when we think about folks like yourselves who now completely bridge the network team and the security team is that sometimes it's hard to sell to both teams, that getting in with one sort of gives you a negative mark with the other and vice versa. So how do you approach that working with both teams problem?
Being a SaaS company for networking and providing security and network and cloud from day one, we have always had to work with the network team. The network team has always been with the group that we work with, but we also have to interact and work with the security team, and in some cases also with the cloud team. There's cloud center of excellence in a lot of companies, so we have always had to work with all these teams. And over time, what we have also observed is in a lot of organizations, there is some kind of synergy building. And in a lot of organizations, there is actually networking and security teams are becoming actually one team. And that actually resonates very well with what we are doing and how we are thinking about a networking platform in its broadest terms, which includes all of the security. If you look at a lot of security companies, or if you look at the networking companies, they are starting to build those cross capabilities. Like if you look at Palo Alto, historically, you'll think of Palo Alto as a security company. Now they acquired a SD-WAN company. That's networking. If you look at Zscaler,
unless you consider that SD-WAN is actually as much security as it is networking, which just reinforces your point.
Fair enough. If you talk about Cisco has a security and a networking portfolio, and a lot of capabilities are intertwining. So we have seen that from vendor side of the house. We also seen synergies from enterprises where security and network teams are coming together, and in many they're all intertwined and working together closely. So in some ways we have been always doing this, but now it becomes even more important that all teams work together to make the company's goals real.
Yeah, and I have to say, I would be remiss to not, note for our listeners that we've helped you guys with some of that research by talking to your customers. And thinking, as you're talking now, I'm thinking about half the time we talked to security folks and the other half the time it was networking. And quite often it was both in the same room. And that's always been interesting because John and I have been tracking the convergence of networking and security. And some of the times we think it's just not happening as fast as it ought to, with air quotes around ought to. But I've noticed that in your customers, it seems to be these are folks that are on the leading edge of that convergence and converging where it makes sense and not where it doesn't, so to speak.
Yeah, and we have seen that across the board, both in terms of large enterprise as well as mid-market customers. So there's definitely a trend line towards the convergence of security and networking.
Well, and I just want to highlight another thing that I found really interesting when talking to your customers, which is we typically in our core research, we have companies self-classify by the attitude towards technology. So companies will either say we're very conservative, we deploy technology late in the game after it's been proven out and it's very mature, all the way up to leading edge, bleeding edge folks. We have 4 buckets. And we've talked about this on Heavy Strategy before, where, it's conservative, moderate, aggressive, and leading edge, bleeding edge. And one thing that's interesting is the vast majority of your customers tend to be aggressive to leading edge, bleeding edge. These are people that are looking forward and kind of seeing how they can potentially use a platform such as yours to get benefits, both cost benefits and operational benefits downstream. So that's just kind of an interesting note. So it would seem to me to be sort of all part and parcel of the same vision that says networking and security converge to a certain extent. Looking forward, having a network platform ought to include basic security capabilities. So networking should include security and kind of vice versa a little bit and all of that.
And Jonna, don't forget the automation piece. In this day and age, if you want to do something at scale, you have to automate. So automation has to be built in. You cannot bolt it on at the end.
That is an excellent point. And I'm glad you made that because, as you know, here at Packet Pushers, we are super heavy believers in automation. So, John, I know you have a few more questions to ask.
Well, just one main one. And taking in stride the idea that the network folks and the security folks and the cloud folks will all be happy to work together and use the same tool set and not have any sort of territoriality about it and puppy guard their little areas of specialization. How do you suggest architects and strategists think about Alkira when they're thinking about their strategic investments in technology?
Yeah, so when you think about Alkira, you have to first of all think about what problems you're trying to solve. If you want to look at the architecture, like today, as you know, the founders of Alkira were also founders of SD-WAN, and the way SD-WAN started was to create a uniform infrastructure or overlay over multiple different transports. Now, if you sit at any C-level meetings in an enterprise today, no matter how strong you are in a single cloud, you know that you are probably one day and one acquisition away from being a multi-cloud. So you have to prepare for multi-cloud. And so think about Alkira, and one of the use cases is single cloud, hybrid cloud, and multi-cloud networking is essentially the same overlay capabilities over this multiple cloud providers. You don't have to stay up to speed with all of the networking limitations, nuances, capabilities of each different cloud provider. But don't look at Alkira purely as an MCNS vendor, right? That's just one of the use cases. Think of Alkira as your networking platform that is delivered from the cloud, and you can use that for a variety of different connectivity models. You can use it for SD-WAN termination. You can use for a global backbone. You essentially look at your networking needs and connect your business partners. You can do so much with the platform, but you don't have to boil the ocean. You have to start with one use case on what your need is, leverage the platform, its capability, which meets your needs of today, as well as potential needs in the future.
Well, and I think that overlay and abstraction component is so incredibly important because I think the big pushback to a solution like Alkira would likely come from someone saying, wait a minute, I have a network. Why are you telling me I need an overlay on top of that network? And to me, the analogy that comes closest to getting the idea across is, well, you could program an assembler. We all know how to do it. And, hit me in the head with a hammer before I ever have to do it again. At some point, you just want to be able to move stuff around with your mouse as opposed to for the 11 millionth time telling your processor how to multiply two numbers. And that's kind of it, what you're talking about here. You can be, your engineers and your architects can be pulling themselves out of the weeds when it comes to trying to make sure that there's no overlap in address spaces, for example, just something simple that you mentioned a while back. Stop worrying about that and start worrying about important things like, are we putting the workloads where they are most cost effective and most effective for our users? It's just that huge a difference.
And you're spot on, Jonna. And the focus is again not on the focus is on and time savings, not really on staff reduction. The focus is how do you get the team that you have who work on high value stuff and leverage the capabilities of a platform to do things much more efficiently so that you can do bigger and better things as opposed to worrying about granular details on how does this stitching work or how does that stitching work. You let the platform do its job.
And I got to say, too, that one of the things we heard from customers was that they were operating with lower risk, both an operational risk level where they weren't constantly worried if they'd kept up with the changes in the platform, for Azure networking or for AWS networking? And were they going to be able to sail on through without having any interruption to services? And also at this security level, staying up with how things were done in each platform so that they could make sure their security policies were being properly instantiated in each environment through all the changes in those environments. One interface to work with to make sure that it's configured properly to meet all security needs, really reduce the level of risk at which they were operating.
Yeah. And going back to earlier in the podcast, we were talking about how customers started in their cloud journey with getting just a direct connect or express out and calling it done from a networking standpoint. Well, we had one customer who all of a sudden had lots of workloads, and their CIO came and asked them that, hey, who's responsible for networking and more importantly, the compliance in the cloud? It's not just about going to the cloud, it's about being compliant in the cloud. You have dev workloads, you have prod workloads. Who's making sure they're not talking to each other? Who's making sure they're segmented correctly and the traffic? And in case a developer or somebody in your ops team creates a VPC and just attaches a internet gateway and just goes to the internet, who's responsible for that? So getting that visibility of the cloud and making sure you have the right security measures so that you don't have just internet breakouts from every VPC and every VNet, but you're going through a centralized firewall inspection and then going at. Those are the right best practices that you need to have. So what I say is you don't need to focus just on bringing traffic to the cloud. You need to worry about networking and compliance in the cloud as well as cloud to cloud. So there's networking has become a lot more complex with lot different traffic patterns. So you need something that has comprehensive networking capabilities, but easy and simple to consume.
So we've ranged far and wide, Manan, and thank you for indulging us in that. Anything that we haven't asked? Anything you'd like to add?
So a few use cases that we haven't discussed, M&A. This is a huge problem. Typically, when companies get acquired or are acquiring other companies, merging the two networks is a huge problem in itself. For larger companies, it takes good 6 to 9 months. We have had customers who have merged their networks in a matter of weeks, and that's because of the deep segmentation and capabilities that we have around mergers and acquisitions. So. A lot of times when you talk about mergers and acquisition, you don't talk about networking, but making sure you do that responsibility and manage how networks are integrated and how the resources are made accessible to the different companies across across the new bigger organization is a challenge in itself that customers have to think about networking in a platform that can deliver these kind of capabilities.
Well, I can completely back you up on that. Back many years ago, I used to have a report that I would periodically give to my clients, which was a blueprint for handling M&A because it is so complex. Okay. Well, we are kind of running out of time here. So just to wrap up, Manan, where can folks find you?
I'm always available on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can follow me on Twitter. I also do conferences, so I would be at AWS reInvent. I am at various Gartner conferences as well. So feel free to reach out to me, connect with me, and I'll be more than happy to share about what I've heard from customers, what customers have done on our platform, and happy to understand your pain points as well.
So great. So you're at AWS reInvent, which I think is December 3rd and 4th. You had also mentioned, since you're such a fan of automation, William Collins from Alkira will be presenting at AutoCon, which is the Network Automation Conference in Denver, the 18th through the 22nd of November. And that is something that Packet Pushers will be heavily behind, so we'll be there as well. That's Network Automation Forum /AutoCon 2 for the agenda and registration details. And you can see some of the Packet Pushers folks and Alkira November 18th through the 22nd. And again, if you're interested in finding out more about Alkira, please check out the Alkira website. That's ALKIRA.com. alkira.com. And you mentioned LinkedIn, Manan, so that's Manan J. Shah at LinkedIn. So with that, thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you to all our listeners for listening. If you've got feedback or a follow-up for us on this topic, please send a message to packetpushers.net/FU because we love to hear your feedback. And we'd love to have Manan back again. So thank you again, Manan.
Thanks a lot for having me, John and John.